In heaven a spirit doth dwell, whose heartstrings are a lute. None sing so wildly well as the angel Israfel, and the giddy stars, so legends tell, ceasing their hymns, attend the spell of his voice all mute. Good evening, co-fans. Welcome back to one of our episodes on tonight. We're going to talk about pop culture. And Jeanie, what specifically are we going to talk about?
Well, Carmen, in this episode, we're going to talk about music and Poe's influence, not only in the world of lyrics for those musical, but their influence based on some of his writings, not specifically them, just singing his songs, but his influence on the writings of the songs.
Yes. And all I have to say is, and I'm going to sing it, music, music, music. Can't help myself.
Exactly. It's lyrical. What can you say?
I know. So in the research that Jeanie and I did for this topic, and this is one that's been very, I think, passionate for both of us because we love music. We both write our own poetry and things like that, and we love to sing. We love doing karaoke, and so we kind of been saving it, but at the same time, it's like we gotta just pull the plug, and so we're unplugged. I'm trying to be fun, very punny here.
Funny.
Yes.
Plus, we were also trying to get some special guests, Mr. Alan Parsons, to be participatory with this, but he was having some health issues and then touring, and so it's hard to get him pinned down, but it's okay. We're still going to do it. It's great.
He's actually going to be in Nashville at the end of this month, which is kind of very coincidental.
Yeah.
Another
Maybe
guest.
We can chase him down.
Yeah, exactly. Stop the bus. But we also were trying to get Steve Harris from Iron Maiden, but he is not doing interviews right now. So you never know, down the road they might be one of our Gothic guests. So we're not giving up.
Fingers crossed.
Yes. And so, but the research that we did, what was very interesting is that, Poe, we all know Poe died in 1849. And the first known that we could find influential song or opera or classical symphony that we could find that was done based on something Poe wrote, what ironically enough is 1908, two things from 1908. And so I think, Jeanie, you were going to talk about the one from Andre Caplet, correct?
Right. It was, I think it constitutes kind of like an opera.
Okay.
And what it was is that he got, inspired by Edgar Allan Poe because of the composer Andrew Caplet, who was born 1878, died 1925. He was influenced by The Masque of the Red Death, and it spurred him to write and compose Conte Fantastica, which means fantastic story. And it is the work that he's most well known for. Now, Caplet was respected contemporary of Debussy and Ravel, who also had ties to Edgar Allan Poe, especially Debussy, who he also wrote something that had some kind of influence from Poe, but was not as overt as with Caplet's fantastic story.
Right. And it was an opera called La Chute de la Maison Usher, based on the fall of the House of Usher.
Exactly. So two of his most popular works, The Masque of the Red Death and The Fall of the House of Usher, which I think it's very ironic that these are the ones that they hit upon for some type of opera because
Yes.
I can see these being very operatic because the Phantom of the Opera and those things are very poetic in my opinion,
Yes,
and
I
that
totally agree.
the score that he wrote for this
Caplet.
was for Caplet. He wrote the piece, which was scored for a string quartet and a piano or a harp,
Hmm.
and it depicts the narrative events of Poe's Masque of the Red Death with eerie and poetic harmonies, textures, and timbres. And he had also a masterful knowledge of how to write for each instrument. So that was very impressive, in my opinion, because especially in operetics or when you're doing soundtracks and stuff with an orchestra, if you
Hmm.
know the best way to incorporate the musical instrument and use it to its finest, then it becomes a life of its own.
Yeah.
So, and he had used this in a disorienting revelry of dancers and Prince Prospero's guests by the whooshing glisses and string flits of the tossed off melodies and their frozen buzz as the haunting apparition of death. So he used these harmonies and these harmonics of these stringed and, instruments to really push home the story.
Hmm.
So you feel the story. You don't just read it, but you feel it. And I think that's one thing with Conte. Conte Fantistica started out as a tone poem, but was published as a quintet after Caplet returned from the war. He was badly damaged by the poison gases in the trenches of Germany during
Okay.
World War One.
Yeah.
So, and we've always talked about this, especially on our poem plug, that different times of our life affect us when we read Edgar Allan Poe. So,
Absolutely. Yes. And I could see if you're going to create, any kind of musical
mhm.
interpretation of one of Poe's works, depending on your age, your experience, and all of that, I could see where that would have a lot more meaning to you than, you know, reading it as a child, learning it in school.
Yeah, and this fits perfectly, like we were talking about how, music in the 19th century was still developing and was being influenced mostly by the Spanish, the
French.
French, and I think even kind of some Italian, but not a lot. Latin
Hmm.
America definitely had a play in it too.
Yeah.
So we were being inundated with the cultures of the tango, the samba, the very I don't want to say statuesque, but kind of like the statuesque type of dancing in the French of where it was everybody and you had kind of like line dancing in today's world, in
Yeah.
my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah.
So, but
Well,
with the war in the early 20th century, kind of like with
right.
Caplet, who was affected, and so that's kind of like when the Romantic period we had Caplet, and then all of a sudden, boom, there's nothing of Poe from around about that era until when, Carmen?
Well, and I'm going to talk a little bit about Debussy for just a second, but
Oh
to
yeah,
answer that
I forgot
question
Debussy.
though, so many of the musical periods overlap each other, which kind of makes sense based on historical things that are going on in the world. So the Romantic period started in 1800 and went to 1910. And so, the Conte Fantastique was finished in 1908. And so that was right at the end of the Romantic period. But then the Modernism period started in 1890. So there kind of could be a little bit of both. But really thinking about the Mask of the Red Death, I think that's going to take on that more romantic period influence of Poe, especially rather
Right.
than the modern period. And then, like, to also with Debussy, he never finished it. He worked on it for 9 years from 1908 until 1917. And one of the things I read, I didn't write all of my notes down, but one of the things that I really remember is that he it was absolutely beautiful, and I have not I listened to it yet of what he did, what the part of the work that he did finish, but it's very it goes along very well with the operatic, singers. It has all, just the pieces are absolutely gorgeous, but he delved so strongly and tried to connect almost like a, what's the term, like for an actor, that gets really into their character. I can't.
Oh, it's not method acting. It's
Yeah, I think it's method acting.
submerged. You know,
Yeah,
he's
yeah, submerged.
submerged
Yeah,
into that. Yeah,
yeah. He
submerged into it.
submerged himself and tried to really relate with Roderick Usher. That I think that's one of the reasons why that it took him so long to write this, but it never was finished. And
And that
so,
kind of makes sense
yeah,
depending on the story because it's very psychological.
yes, yes. And just with, thinking about just the madness that was going on in the story, and he obviously had to have been a perfectionist for taking that long to write something that he never did finish. And
Yeah.
so,
And
and again, I think his story, his opera as well, I think really ties into that romantic period, even though it technically he worked on it past that. I think he probably falls into more of that romantic period writer, or composer, I should say.
yes, but I don't see, the fall of the House of Usher being a romantic piece.
Yeah, I mean,
It
I
falls into that category of the romantic period,
right.
but that may have been why he struggled so much and wasn't able to finish it because, in my opinion, the story itself doesn't really rely or lay upon more of the romanticism. Now, albeit it could be in a psychological aspect, kind of like when we talk about the Oedipus complex
Mm-hmm.
of where, falling in love with your own mother.
Mm-hmm.
So this, the twin thing, they could have had a, I don't want to say incestual type of,
Well,
thing, but
some scholars have brought that factor in from that story before.
yeah, and that's why it fits. And that's what I
Yeah,
was saying with Debussy is that he was, he could have just been lost into the story and then
I
he
think he
just
was. Yeah,
he just couldn't psychologically get himself out of it,
yeah.
in my
It
opinion.
sounds like a Twilight Zone episode.
He does, doesn't it? It's like really like woo.
Oh, but then, so the other work that comes from the same period, and it's definitely, to me, goes into that romantic period, but it's just past of when the romantic period ended, was
Hmm.
Rachmaninoff's version of the Bells. And I have actually been able to go see the Nashville Symphony actually do that symphony, and it
Oh
is
yeah.
absolutely gorgeous, absolutely beautiful.
And that one would definitely fit into the romantic period
Yes.
because
And yeah,
it talks about the, the spreading of life,
yeah,
the intro, the living, and then the death.
yeah,
So,
the seasons of life. And
mhm.
Rachmaninoff is one of my probably favorite composers anyway, not just for the bells, but he also did Rhapsody on a theme from Paganini in G, and that's the score for the movie Somewhere in Time, which is definitely romantic and
Mhm.
time travel. So we're not going to digress, but had to
Nope,
throw that
nope.
out there. But yeah, so now we're left into the modernism period that again started around 1890. And so Jeannie and I were talking about it before we
I thought the romantic period started in 1890.
no, romantic period was 1800.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I got that
modernism.
mixed up. I thought you said 1900, so I was
No,
like,
yeah,
because
no.
the Romantic period definitely be along the lines of the Victorian age. So,
Yes, yes, absolutely.
all right, sorry, go
Yeah.
ahead.
Oh, that's okay. So we were talking about this before we hit record, and we were thinking, okay, so from 1913, 1917, when Debussy stopped and did not finish,
Mm-hmm.
you got some things factoring in here, because the next thing, now granted, there may be something out there that we just didn't find in our research, but the next thing we found was not until 1960 that was in musical, that was linked to Poe or influenced by Poe. And so Jeannie was going to talk a little bit about this, of why we think that is, because thinking about 1913, 1917, what was
Mm-hmm.
going on in the world, Jeannie?
Well, we were in the middle of World War One because in
Yes,
1914, too many 19s.
you got
Not only
date crazies tonight.
exactly. I mean, not only do are we seeing that the World War One, and especially with Belgium and France and all those having to live through that. Well, most of them didn't,
Yeah.
but and then not only along those lines, then we had the sinking of the Titanic. We
Mm-hmm.
had the sinking of the Lithuania.
Yeah.
We had the prohibition in America that came out. So
Right.
then all of a sudden the world of jazz and blues started coming into play around that time because
Yeah.
it was more along of the socio uh, stressors that was going on in the
Yes.
world.
Yeah.
Not just in World War One, but here at home in the nation, and we had all those with prohibition and bootlegging, and then we had the Great Depression,
Mm-hmm.
which hit, which a lot of people, there was no work, there was living in the dust bowl and having to survive and being able to find ways of supporting. So then after that, then you got a rolling in there into the 1930s, which was leading into World War II.
Yep. Yep.
Because then not only the World War II were we not only fighting once more with Germany, but then we were,
Mm-hmm.
involved in Italy, but then Japan
Yeah.
bombing
Yeah.
Pearl Harbor in the early 1940s.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of stressors and a lot of upheaval, especially in the society, was going on. And yes,
Right.
there were songs, but those songs were more built for a patriotic type of thing. We had the big band era.
Right. Well, yes, they were feel good, but then when
Mm-hmm.
you also think about the more of the blues style music, it was
Mm-hmm.
over trying to overcome things, and where
Right.
you can, connect with other people going through the same things.
Yeah, and I mean, you had the greats that were coming out. You had Robert Coltrane, The Crossroads, and those stories. Which that
Hmm.
story hit that song to me is very reminiscent of a Poe story.
Yeah. Are you talking
You
about
know,
Robert Johnson?
yes,
Yes. Yes.
it's Lewis Coltrane, right? Lewis Coltrane and Robert Johnson. Okay, I
I
was
think so. Well,
yeah, I
because
can't remember.
yeah, I know definitely Robert
They were
Johnson.
the Coltrane was popular too. I just never can remember his first name.
Yeah, yeah,
But
I
yeah,
do
Robert
this.
Johnson's
I do the
Crossroads.
same thing, and I agree. That story is very Poe-esque and nicely portrayed in a movie from the '80s with Ralph
Mm-hmm.
Macchio called Crossroads. And if listeners and viewers, if out or listeners, I should say, out there, if you
Yes,
haven't seen that movie and you do like blues music, you definitely need to check out that movie.
absolutely. Because that one, above all, is reminiscent of "Never Bet the Devil Your Head."
Yes.
I mean, it may not have been influenced by Poe, but it's definitely a Poe-esque story.
Yes,
So, but
I totally
then
agree. Yeah.
then you've
And
got the end of World War II in the 1940s, and then the 1950s
mhm,
start up, and then you've got like the shag, and you've got the hop the teen scene was coming in with the greasers and,
And the
you know,
beach
yes,
music
beach,
and
Beach Boys and all
yeah.
those.
Yeah, well, and
So,
rock and roll kind of really finding its place because I mean the roots of it really started in blues and things like that,
oh yeah,
and the
Elvis Presley.
rockabilly, and yeah, and so then it's like, once World War II was over, it was back to, things are great
Eh,
in the
not so much
1950s.
because,
Well,
remember, we were under the red threat, communism.
true, but when you think about the golden years of Hollywood were really like the 30s, 40s, early 50s.
Hmm.
So, yes, you did have that threat of communism, the beginning of the Cold War,
Hmm.
but when you look at just things were better economically and the
Yeah,
family, and those kinds of things for the most part, things were better. And so when I think about it, it's like there weren't areas where people would go to look at Poe and write music necessarily.
right. But at the same time, the 50s was when pop culture really took off because you
Yes.
had the Andy Warhol, you had, lava lamps, you you
Well,
had
that's
all
more
the psychedelic.
60s. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. They
Yeah.
built up, and then you go into the lava lamps and the '60s and the flower children and Woodstock.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was like a total change, a total movement.
Yeah.
And so then all of a sudden, the movement caught up with the music, or the music caught up with the movements, whichever way you
Yes.
want to put it.
Yeah.
And
I
then all of a
agree.
sudden,
Yeah.
Poe started showing back up again.
Yeah, and the one song from 1960 that we found was actually based on the Black Cat. And
Hmm.
so, big band, there's always been a place for the big band, genre area, however you want to
Hmm.
say it. But when you really think about the heyday of it, 1960, it would have been starting to like linger, or like,
Taper off.
yeah, taper
Yeah.
off. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. And so the song that we found was, again, it was called The Black Cat and done by Buddy Morrow and his orchestra, which was a big band orchestra. And I did
Hmm.
actually listen to that, and it's great. It's got some spooky elements. It's definitely big band. It's something I'm definitely going to add on my Halloween playlist of songs. It's really fun and not the Poe-esque mood of the Black Cat.
Right.
Maybe from the
Because that
beginning,
one,
but yeah, but I enjoyed listening to that. But I do like that style of music though.
yeah. And then it moved into like in the late 60s in 1967, where we
Hmm.
got the Beatles with
Yes.
Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album, where Poe has his appearance, especially in their song The Walrus. I am the
Yes.
walrus. That they declared, man, you should have seen them kicking Edgar Allan Poe.
Oh, that's
Yes,
and
and they
he's
even made him a member of Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club by placing him in a prominent position on the memorable album cover.
yeah, he's like
Which, I
at the
mean,
top center, top
yeah,
center.
it kind of fits. He does fit with Sergeant Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club
Yeah. Oh,
because it's
absolutely.
like
He should be the
always
poster child. Yeah.
getting his heart broken and all that kind of
I
stuff.
know, over and over again. And,
Hmm.
you kind of wonder where was it John Lennon or um,
Paul
who,
McCartney.
yeah, Paul McCartney, which one wrote that song, The Walrus? Or
I
was it
don't remember. Hold on,
a
let me
collaboration?
check it out so I can make sure I get it right
Because
because
the question I was gonna, that I would love to ask one of them, ghost or no, live in person, is,
yeah.
where was the inspiration for that line?
Yeah, how did, how did you actually come up with that?
Mm-hmm.
And but I've also heard different things about, I think in that band particular,
Yeah.
one of their albums they said that they did and they were completely stoned the whole time. So
Okay.
it says the lyricist for I Am the Walrus in 1967 was written by John Lennon and credited to Lennon and McCartney.
Okay. So I'm sure
So,
that they had a collaboration with it. I mean, a lot of the music they did.
oh, absolutely. It
Yeah.
says here that Lennon wrote the song to confound listeners who had been afforded serious scholarly interpretations of the Beatles' lyrics. So that doesn't surprise me that he would just read it, write it just because he
Yeah.
wanted to confound everybody.
Yeah.
But yeah, John Lennon and credited to McCarthy and Lennon. So Lennon
Okay.
probably wrote most of the lyrics, and then McCartney did most of the beat
Music.
or the
Yeah.
music.
Yeah. I think you're probably right. But then really and truly that was the all the what we really kind of found from the 60s. I think, Jeannie, did you find anything else?
Well, let's see. Those were the only two.
Those were the
Um,
biggest ones I found.
yeah, those were the biggest ones of the 60s
But then the
that,
70s, we've got a couple of very big,
yeah, we got
noteworthy.
Pink Floyd coming
Mm-hmm.
in uh, on the Dark Side of the Moon that they
Mm-hmm.
put uh, songs to with or use excerpts of the Telltale Heart and the Raven in their works on
Mm-hmm.
that album, and that happens to be one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that was the 70s.
Well, and you've also got Queen had a song in 1974 called Nevermore, and
Yep,
it's a delightful song. I mean, it definitely was inspired by Poe and the Raven.
and it's so weird that
Mm-hmm.
you would have the you would think that Queen, why, but at the same time, I think when it came out, wasn't that when Bohemian Rhapsody was also big and popular? Because this one, the one they did that was Poe inspired, was very short, whereas then you
Yes.
had Bohemian Rhapsody over 7 minutes long, I think it
Right.
was. So,
Yeah, because I think you and I listened to, I think, Nevermore together, and it
yep,
was like just a little over a minute. It was, or under 2 minutes, I should say. And yeah,
yeah,
which
it
we were
wasn't
like,
very long.
wow. Yeah, but it's really it's a nice song. And then Alan Parsons Project released a full album in 1976, Tales of Mystery and Imagination. And I think my husband and I listened to it in the car on a trip not that long ago, and
Mhm.
the music is just fantastic. It really is. And I think, Jeannie, you've got a list of some of the songs that are on the album.
Oh yeah, the Alan Parsons Project has, let's see, let me see if I can list them all here. The System of Dr. Tar and Professor Feather, A
Hmm.
Dream Within a Dream, um, The Cask of Amontillado, The Fall of the House of Usher, The Raven, The Telltale Heart, the To One in Paradise.
Hmm.
Let's see, I don't know which one that is.
I believe it's a
But
poem.
yeah, To One in Paradise is the closing track on the Alan Parsons Project's debut concept album. Um,
And I just thought of something I that this has not come to my brain before, that I'm going to look up while you're still talking about that.
okay, and it says that this particular one was titled off of Tales of Mystery and Imagination of Edgar Allan Poe's poem. That it was based upon the same title, the same title.
Hmm.
The song lyrics are different from the poem's words, but the theme remained the same.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's one of the things. And I think that's the thing with most of these songs. Not many actually are just completely renditions of the poetry being put to music. Some of them were
Right.
just inspirations.
Right. And then some, they're actually singing poetry lyrics as the song lyrics. Yeah.
Yes. And now in
It's,
1979, there was an album by Susie and the Banshees. The album's name was Join Hands, and they did a song called Premature Burial. Good Lord, I
oh,
couldn't get a second one out.
okay.
It says the title of this dirge-like tune was taken from his story, and that in November of 2014, the Susie was interviewed by Mojo and said that it was an expression of claustrophobia of being hemmed in both sides by both society and people's limitations. So that's
Interesting.
where, yeah, so that was a 1979 one.
Okay. And I think the ones I mentioned were the only ones that I found from the 70s. But then moving to the 80s, you've got
Mm-hmm.
1981 with Iron Maiden's song "Murders in the Rue Morgue," and
Yep.
it for a heavy metal song for Poe, it's fantastic. It's fantastic.
Oh, yes. I mean, Iron Maiden, they definitely had some interesting songs. And
Yeah.
but it kind of fits that they would choose Murders in the Rue Morgue.
Yes. Absolutely.
I am Iron Man. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I had a
Don't.
flashback. I had a flashback. Sorry.
Yeah. The only other one I found from the 80s was something that came out in 1988. The singer was Soda Estéreo, and the song is called Corazón de la Tour, and it's based on the Telltale Heart.
Oh,
And
very
so, and
cool.
it's all in Spanish.
Ah,
It's really cool.
that is cool.
Yeah. So, Jeannie, did you find some of the songs from the 80s?
There's not a lot that's in the 80s.
Yeah, it kind of took a he kind of took a back seat a little bit, at least from what we could find in the 80s and just a little bit in the 90s. It
Yeah, I don't
really,
even think Stevie Nicks is even hers is even in 2000.
yeah,
So,
yeah, because that's later on. We're going to talk about that.
but yeah,
Um,
the 80s and 90s, there's nothing really that's popping out that
yeah,
had a Poe.
the only thing I found from the 90s was now this is one you also found it because we talked about it in
Uh-huh.
1995. The song "Old Evil Eye"
Oh,
came
yes.
out from Insane Clown
Insane Clown
Posse.
Posse.
I was like, how it just seems so ironic in a way.
Oh, yes. Insane Clown Posse.
And
Definitely a Poe theme right there.
yes, and totally has to relate to the Telltale Heart.
Yep. It is. I mean, it is very, very creepy, very macabre, and
Yeah.
very, very apropos.
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree. Yeah. And
Oh,
so,
yeah.
really, and the only other one I found from the 90s was from 98, a song called My Lost Lenore by Tristiana. And I didn't have a
Mhm.
chance to listen to it, but yeah, that was the only thing I found. It's really interesting, again, looking at, where music kind of took Poe, had kind of a hiatus, came back, had another hiatus for 20-ish years with, not having a whole lot of Poe being influenced. And then in the 2000s, he explodes.
Yeah, and I can understand a little bit about why, there was very few in the 80s, very, like one and or two in the 90s, because that's where you got the big hair bands coming into play
Yep,
and you got the boy bands.
yep, exactly.
So,
And
and Poe
country,
to me doesn't fit with boy bands. And then,
yeah,
yeah, country took
more
another explosion.
well, because country was kind of becoming more popularized, more modernized to
Mhm.
what it is now, going away from the original roots of where it kind of started. And
Yeah,
yeah,
and even the country hillbilly was taking a back seat.
yeah. And I mean, and you think about, in the world going on, in 1989, the Cold War ended, but then early
The
90s,
first Gulf War we
Gulf
had
War was
started
going
again. Yeah.
on. So a lot life was very different. And then all the grunge from the 90s, which I don't even want to talk about.
Yeah,
So
no. And punk rock. Nope, we're
yeah,
not going there.
yeah.
So
And
then,
so
yeah, like you said, the early 2000s, we have the Yardbirds.
yes.
They're not as funny to talk about as the Insane Posse Clown Club, but okay.
Right. But yeah, they
Um,
did. I think it was Dream Within a Dream. They did a
yes.
version of that. Yeah.
And then 2004, the Ano
Anon
Anoni
is it
Anoni
Anani? Yeah.
Anani or Anoni in 2004, they did The Lake.
Yeah. Based on
Um,
Poe's poem The Lake. And I
mhm.
also found 2001 a heavy metal group called The Grave Digger did a version of The Raven, and I did listen to a little bit of that, and it's definitely metal. Like you're banging your head when you're listening to it.
Oh,
So
absolutely. And then you got Black Rebel Motorcycle Club.
mhm.
They were 2010.
Yeah, you're I was gonna say you're jumping way ahead because I have other ones I found too before that. That's okay though.
Okay. What did you have? Because
Uh
that's the only ones I had of the 2000s, the early 2000s, and then
well
2009.
yeah, well 2003 Lou Reed released a double CD concept album called The Raven, and it had a lot of musical numbers, but it also had spoken word interpretations of Poe on that album. And then in 2004, a singer called Utada Hikaru, um,
Hikaru. Hikaru.
definitely more pop, and called Kremlin Dusk. And so I didn't get to really go into that one as much, but it looked very interesting.
Okay.
And then 2006, Escape the Fate. This one's another rock one. It's When I Go Out, I Want to Go Out on a Chariot of Fire. And then someone called Nightwish, another metal group, did The Poet and the Pendulum in 2007.
Okay.
And then you said you were up to 2009.
Yes. That was no, that wasn't Stevie Nicks. Stevie Nicks was 2011.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
Um,
And her version of Annabelle Lee is really nice, and she changed a little bit of the lyrics. Just I think that it kind of went better for the song, but very minor changes.
I did skip this one. I thought it was later. I thought it was 2012, but it's actually 2002
Uh-huh.
from Good Charlotte called My Bloody Valentine.
Oh yeah, you were talking about that one. Yeah.
Yes, so it was that one and let's see. What was the other one?
Did it say what that one is based on? Which story? Or just
It,
Poe in general?
it says the description they put was inspired by his short story The Telltale Heart.
Okay.
A murderer plagued by the thumping of the heart. It reflected more mature songwriting for the band. Because the song itself they wrote about a guy who kills the boyfriend of a girl he's in love with so he can have her for himself.
Oh,
So
okay. Interesting.
yeah,
Okay.
it's and it's a play off the love song of My Funny Valentine.
Interesting. Okay.
So and that's why they were like kind of in a jealous moment. That's when they kind of took it, twisted it, and made it a little darker and
Hmm.
added music to it and
Okay.
kind of got Edgar Allan Poe vibes to it.
Yeah.
So there's that one, and then there was, let me see.
I've got another one from 2011 I wanted to talk about, unless you got something before that.
That's what I was trying to. 2010, Alissana called
Hmm.
the Thespian.
Hmm.
Um, it's a hardcore band called Alissana. It's a
Okay.
concept album inspired by the poem of Annabelle Lee. Actually, it is inspired by Annabelle Lee also.
Okay.
Um, and they named it the Thespian. That's kind of weird, but
Oh,
okay.
that is, yeah.
And then let's see, what year are we up to?
Well, let's see. I had one from 2011. We skipped around a little bit, which is okay.
Yeah, and then Megadeth in
Hmm.
2009 had
Okay.
the hardest part of letting go and sealed with a kiss. Um, the front man told artistdirect.com that he wrote this song for his wife.
Okay.
Uh, I was like, okay, well,
That
that's,
that kind of it's like, okay.
yes.
Question
He,
motive
he
there.
goes on to say that it's funny when people just scream holy wars for the second part of the hardest part of letting go sealed with a kiss. I was reading Edgar Allan Poe's collection of short stories. And he goes, I like Poe. I think that he's got some really incredible climaxes in his stories.
Hmm.
And then he goes on to say that when he was growing up, that he was a fan of Aesop and Aesop's fables. So
Okay.
they kind of got mixed in together.
Okay. That makes sense. Yeah.
Uh,
But then when
so
you mentioned Sealed with a Kiss, I also go back to I think it's Neil Sedaka's like 19 around the 1950s, Sealed with a
mhm.
Kiss, that
Yep,
song.
sealed with a kiss. And then of course
Uh-huh.
we had Stevie Nicks in 2011 with Annabelle Lee.
Yeah, and another version, this is the one I wanted to talk about, of Annabelle Lee. It was done the same year, 2011, by Sarah Jarosz, Jarosz, and she also does have a band. She's actually played at Bonnaroo before, and with other some big names, because I had never really heard of her. But I listened to this version because I was like, huh, same year as Stevie Nicks. I wonder if it was about the same time or not. And so I was pleasantly surprised when I pulled it up. And she is literally doing the poem Annabelle Lee, and it is bluegrass. And,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes bluegrass has like a Celtic sound to it. That's
Oh
what
yeah.
this was. And I had seen that she had done some other covers, and so listened to those as well. She had one with that was bluegrass for When Doves Cry by Prince. And so
Oh yeah.
she's very talented. I would say check her out, but that version of Annabelle Lee was just, it was so different and unique. I really enjoyed listening to that.
Yeah, I listened to it earlier when I was looking up some of these other songs and stuff, and
Okay.
I was like, oh, wow, okay.
Yeah.
That was
Yeah.
something out of left field. I didn't
I didn't
foresee.
expect
But
it. Yeah. I thought it was going to be more classical, when I looked at the picture before I clicked play.
oh, absolutely. And
Yeah.
then in 2013, there's the You're So Dark by the Arctic Monkeys.
Okay.
They kind of did it off of, they got inspiration from The Raven
Okay.
and said, you got your own kind of ravens, and the lead singer sings here of the girl and your murder of crows.
Yeah.
So they
Okay.
kind of used both of those in there together. And then there was one that I was telling you about that was just what, a couple years ago that I
Was it,
was, I don't
was
know
it,
if that was oh
are you
yeah,
talking about
that's not, it's the one that really doesn't go because it's not really, um, the guy who's the lead singer of the band is from Poe's hometown, Richmond, Virginia.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yes, and so he wrote this song called Nevermore, but it's not
Yes.
strictly. He does include a little bit of homage to Poe with some of the song, like "This is a reckoning." You hear the raven scream, hanging by a thread, so go and choke on it.
Okay.
So it's kind of a narrative mystery, but it doesn't really do a lot for Poe itself. It's just that it's
Okay.
influenced by him.
Gotcha. And what year was that again?
2022.
Okay. Yeah, because there was one in 2018 by Edward W. Hardy. Of he is a violin player, and he has a
Hmm.
version called Nevermore.
Yeah, that one didn't come up in any of my research.
Okay. And those were the main ones I found, but one I was just thinking about that it I think won the Eurovision Song Contest, and I think was it 2023 that came out, the Who the Hell is Edgar
I
by
think so.
Taya and Selena. They were from Austria.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, I looked it up while you were talking about the musician from Richmond, because I was like, hold on, that's probably the most recent one. Yeah, it was 2023. It went viral from the Eurovision
Hmm.
contest. Yeah, who the hell is Edgar? They had a video and everything. It was
Uh,
just
it's very, it's very in your face. Who the hell is Edgar? You know,
yes.
I think, I think that's the reaction sometimes when people stumble across like our podcasts or things on our YouTube, going, "Who the hell is Edgar?"
Yeah. But from however many songs we just mentioned, I think
Mm,
most people know who the hell Edgar is.
or had some introduction to him. And I mean,
Yes.
not only that, but in the American school system in most states, you do have an introduction to Edgar Allan Poe either in middle
Yes.
school or high school.
Exactly. And now one thing that we can say based on doing interviews with people from the UK is that they didn't get a whole lot of Poe growing up in
Mm-mm.
middle junior high, or high school, whatever. I know the way they call their schools are very different. And
Primary
so
and secondary. They didn't get a
yeah,
lot of secondary. They only have
yeah.
two versions. So,
Yeah, which I mean, it makes sense. He's an American author. Now, granted, there are some European authors that were influenced by Poe, but at the same time, they're going to talk about British authors and European authors probably more. That just makes perfect sense.
yeah, I mean, think about it. Unless you're doing a specific genre or years or something, because we don't really talk about anything that's not outside your own purview.
Right, exactly.
Now, here in America, we've got all kinds of, because our history is still in infancy compared to the rest
Yes.
of most of the rest of the world. So
Hmm. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
that's why we incorporate a lot of the world into what we teach and what we talk about.
Hmm. Well, because
And
it has had such an influence in the creation of America.
yeah,
Definitely.
absolutely. I mean, because Poe, when he was born in 1809, we had only been a country for about maybe 25 years,
Yeah.
30 at the most.
It's
Um,
it's really crazy to think about that.
yeah, I mean, and he was born into an American citizen, but at the same time, his parents were not American citizens. They were
Yeah.
immigrants from London, right?
Yeah, well,
London?
his
Yeah,
mother, yes, and his father's family came from England, Ireland.
Ireland.
Yeah,
Yeah, so Great Britain in that
yeah.
area and stuff.
Hmm.
So yeah, it's
But I
really
don't,
hard. Go
yeah,
ahead. Oh,
I don't remember David Poe Senior or Junior. I'm sorry, is his father. Senior is his
right.
grandfather.
Hmm.
Let me look that up because I don't remember where his father was born, if he was actually born in the United States.
Yeah, I don't remember that. I don't. I know that his grandfather was a colonel, wasn't he? Wasn't he in
He
the military?
was, well, they called him general, but he wasn't a general. He was,
Right.
yeah, but he was in the army. Yeah, David Poe Jr. was born in Baltimore, Maryland.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and Eliza was from London.
Okay. So it was just Eliza that came over from London.
Yeah, but Poe's ancestors came over from Great Britain, that all
Yeah,
that area. Yeah. So yeah, so his father
that
was
makes sense.
American born. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it blows my mind sometimes, because teaching about the history of that time, but then you get so immersed into kind of like Edgar Allan Poe and look at different things and that time period and everything, and
Yeah.
it's like, wow, he was writing about it and experiencing only things that we talk about in history,
Yeah.
and he was so influential in later times to a lot of the history that came after him.
Oh, I know. It's surreal to think about it. It really is.
Yep. But it's awe inspiring
Yeah,
too.
it is. And to me, the topic that we chose to talk about for pop culture tonight is also awe-inspiring, of how many different people have taken Poe's influence through
Mm-hmm.
either one particular story or poem, or just the man's genius in writing himself, and
Mm-hmm.
created all these different songs, from anywhere from classical music to rap, or hip hop, or heavy
Mm-hmm.
metal. I mean, it's just beyond surreal. It is.
Yeah. And it kind of makes sense also because the lyrics in any type of music are poetry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
And it just, actual poetry is not a song until it's put to music. And then,
exactly. Yeah.
mm,
I do a whole lesson on poetry versus music. You know, can one stand alone, or is it something that has to be merged together? And it's great discussion with students, because you find out some of their musical tastes are not just what you think of as typical teenagers that listen to just what's popular now. I always find it every year when I do this lesson, of how some of them really are into classical music, or like old school country music and things like that. And
mhm.
it's great discussion with them.
Oh yes. I mean, and that's like I was listening to some of our music from our day.
Hmm.
And then I was like, I don't know why I never noticed when I listened to this song the
Hmm.
lyrics, and what it was actually about, until now in this day and age, and I look going, huh, Whoa, I'm glad I did not know that when I was growing up. So, because
That
there's
is
some
true.
songs, it's like, like,
Some
say ignorant.
songs, yeah, some songs have hidden innuendos that
Hmm.
you don't know until you're grown up or think you're grown up.
Oh, and that's just like some of the movies from our day and age. And I was rewatching one, and they were dropping the, damn and the F bomb and all this. And I'm going, why did that never phase me in my day? Never
Hmm.
even noticed. And now it's like, okay.
Yeah.
It's
Oh,
weird how it happens that way. But Poe still being around and being put to
relevant.
music,
Hmm.
yeah, that's the way it should go.
I totally agree. And I think on that
No.
note,
On that note, we
we
are
are Ho
Poe out.
out.
At morn, at noon, at twilight dim, Maria, thou hast heard my hymn. In joy and woe, in good and ill, Mother of God, be with me still.